Okay, so you guys want to talk about Redshift and ExplosiaFX. Let's do it. So I just, for this tutorial, I grabbed this file from the content repository from Insidium's site and opened it up, and I cached the high quality EFX domain just so I could get, I can move around the scene and render whatever I like. So let's take a look in cycles what this thing looks like. And this is just the material that they provide. And I think if you use one of the newer materials, they're slightly different. So like, pick like this one. This is kind of like the default fire and smoke one now. So plop that on there. It's probably a little brighter overall. I think they're doing different things. They're pulling in temperature and using that for the color of the fire part. So they're in the past where they were just using a black body like single number. I think they were just kind of putting in their own number, something like whatever it was. You can type whatever you like. But then they're using temperature data. So and then they're doing some range mapping of the temperature data into the black body range, I guess. So it's probably more accurate. And then you can play with like the amount of the fire. So that's like this multiply node, effectively less fire, small number. And you can tweak the ramp, right? So this is just like lets in more or less of the data into from the density. And then up here you have the scattering and the absorption, and that comes from the smoke channel. And they have a clever system where they take one color and they invert it and use the inverted color in the absorption color. So it's getting a really nice color effect. You get the the blues in the highlights and the browns kind of in the depths. So if you tweak these, add more absorption here, get a thicker look. I think this render doesn't have a lot of smoke. It's mostly fire. So you'd have to crank this number up like crazy to get a lot of absorption. And then the scattering, again, you want to scatter a lot, right, to kind of cover up all that fire. So that's just kind of remapping the numbers. And then we can do that pretty easily in Redshift. It's a similar system. So let's pause that renderer and switch to Redshift, which I put in my tabs here. So all we need to do, well, a few things. We need Redshift lights. So let's get ourselves a couple of area lights. I'll just put them in the same places. So copy them, reset the PSR, and we'll take a look at them. That's hidden. Let's turn those off now. And they were using point lights, so I'm just going to use area lights because they're better. Right, so like so. And we need to contribute an amount of the light to the volume. So you won't get light scattering correctly unless you do that. And then we need a material. So a Redshift volume material gets put onto there. Let's take out the cycles one just for fun. Let's switch our renderer to Redshift. And I'm going to make my render square just because I can see more. zoom in a little bit. Okay. So the volume, you got to pull in the data. You need the density data of the smoke, which you get by going here and pulling in the smoke. And your emission channel gets the fire. They call it burn in cycles. It's fire in Redshift. So let's turn our render on and see what happens. And you get a lot of whiteness. And that's because you need the color information. And I did not, when I cached this, include color data. I guess it's off by default. Right, so in the channels here, under the solver tab, you can turn on color, and that will pull in the color data that's set here in the display channel. It's not that important, frankly. So, because this really just wants some colors to pull in. Right now it's just black to white, so you can get yourself a heat ramp, you know, play with these colors. And let's just turn off the smoke. Just delete the channel. Well, I guess you need something. Doesn't like it otherwise. We can turn the density down. That's crazy. Of the, yeah. So I guess it's just, you know, it's mostly, that's just fire right there. And you know, you can do what they were doing, which was like cutting off the top end of it. Like doing something like that. You know, that's just kind of pulling out some of the data. If you don't want all of it. That's one way to do it. The other way to do it is to, well, there's, you know, all these things are basically affecting the amount, right? So this scale is just kind of a multiplier on top of this, right? So if I want it to be less, I just pull it back, right? So you can do that. Another way to do it is just by changing the tint amount to less, right? It's kind of the same. If you're just doing black and white, that's effectively the same as messing with the scale. It's just it's whatever you prefer. But you know, you can also do an overall tint color on top of the ramp, right? It's effectively just colorizing the ramp after the fact with the same color. And then you know, kind of do the same things with the smoke, right? So let's get some absorption. Obviously it's blowing out like crazy because it's just too thick. So again, if you had color data, you could pull in the color channel here, but we need to just do it ourselves. So, you know, you can make changes to the ramps. You can also tint overall. Alright, so with absorption, white means it absorbs more, black means it absorbs less. So if you want more absorption, you can't go beyond white. Obviously, white is the limit, so that's what the coefficient is for. It multiplies the ramp. So let's, you know, make that a higher number. And then, you know, you're going to start seeing your voxels. The more absorption you have, you start seeing the detail in your solver. And that's really where Cycles is a little better, because Cycles gives you rendering setup configuration to kind of smooth out these things. So in Cycles, the volume step rate and the max steps are combined, and the higher this number, the smoother, you know, these steps become. it's fine in a still render, but when you're animating, that volume step can get really crazy because it's like passing through the voxels and you get really weird bands. So, you know, this is only really helpful to me. Like, to me, I don't think this is great for animation. Like, it's going to work well for stills. But in Redshift, you don't have that, right? So that's kind of the limitation with Redshift. You basically have to get all of your detail, you know, set up in at your solver, right? So if you want the stepping to go away, your solver needs, you know, the voxel size just needs to be way smaller. You know, it's going to have to be like 0.5 or something to get enough detail in here, which will take forever to cache. But that's just the nature of it. You know, Redshift doesn't have the best volume rendering. It's quick, but you know, this is the limitation here. But you know, generally you don't want to crank up your absorption so much because you're going to start seeing that problem, right? So if we bring back our numbers here, you know, we can dial it back this way, and then absorption can be dialed back. And you're basically kind of like using less of that information, so you'll see maybe some less stepping, but you know, obviously you won't see as much data as well. So, and then you know, you could tweak the kind of amount here. This is by changing the tint, you're effectively just keep lowering this number, right? The scattering number just gets lower and lower by having less of it. So you know, you can leave this number alone and just play with the overall tint. It's kind of the same thing. So however you want to do it. And then, you know, you can colorize your ramps, right? So maybe this is a little blue in it, right? And maybe you get a little warmth in it, you know, with this range. You know, a little bit goes a long way. Then you can do the same thing as Cycles was doing. They were basically having the exact same ramp in both the absorption and the scatter. So just, you know, whatever changes you make in one, copy it, paste it in the other. I wish Redshift allowed you to get access to this stuff through the nodes, but literally there's no nodes. Like, you can't pull anything into the inputs, no inputs at all. And that's kind of annoying. But that's just the way it is for now. Maybe someday they'll do a new volume material. I don't know. It is kind of limiting. And then again, you can cut off the top end here if you wanted to. Let's see what that does. Paste it in here. You know, see, essentially just kind of mimic what they were doing in Cycles with these ramps. You know, maybe it's I don't know. I'm sort of losing my point. Effectively, you can get very similar looks. Not much to it. It's just a matter of like, how much thickness do you want? Use these numbers, right? And if you want to use the tint, you can, just as a black and white value. Obviously, absorption, it's probably, you don't want to go lower because you're just gonna start having less absorption. You know, you're probably not gonna go crazy high on these numbers because you're just gonna get so many steps. That's just gonna suck. but I don't know. It's whatever you guys want to do, right? So you can crank up your numbers like that and just go wild with it. It's whatever you want, honestly. And then again, the lights, lights have an effect, so you contribute less light, right? Or you just leave that on 1, and then like you can obviously change the amount of light you have, right, to lower. Change the color of the lights. Let's just pick a pink light. So sky's the limit, guys. Do what you want. Mess around. You can get really cool looks, obviously, by just playing with the numbers. And that's kind of all there is to it. Let's see what you make.